What is up with it, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back. It has been a minute. This is Around the VLA. My name is Rob St. Clair. I'm joined live from Arizona by Vince Zanzuki. And Vince, since the last time we did one of these, there have been three full, big, and significant VLA events that have happened. There have been dozens and dozens and dozens of matches played, and we've got a lot to get to just to kind of catch up to where the league is at, take advantage of this little lull in the regular season action before we jump right back into it in April, and then we're starting to hand out some pretty meaningful titles after that. So, what's been up with you, and where do you want to start?
Let's just start right from the beginning, huh? We got the East Division event number one.
Oh
And
yeah.
there we go.
So the last time we did one of these was at the very, in what was it, early February, right after we announced the Northeast Force making their VLA debut. Finally, we were able to announce that, and they hosted an event in Connecticut, and a great event, by the way. A huge shout out to the New England AAU region. It was fantastic to be there in front of the crowds. The streams went well. The caliber of volleyball was high. We got to have Novice. Novice was in the house. That was super cool. I got to meet the guys that from Novice that are our new apparel sponsor. They were awesome, and they were blown away by the level of volleyball that there was there. And there were some pretty insane matches. The one that jumps out in my memory for sure was the LVC bounce match, like that second match that went to five. The first match that was on Saturday that day, because like you see that score there, 19-17 in the fifth. And what that doesn't tell you is that bounce was up 14-11. And so they had three match points, and LVC came all the way back and beat him in like late in that fifth set on LVC's way to going undefeated in that event. So that was the big takeaway for me, is that LVC with a very different roster, or like rather an incomplete roster. We know that their roster is going to get better throughout the year for like the East Cup in Buffalo that we'll talk about later, and VLA Cup. Obviously, they didn't have all their guys, and they still came in and were able to take care of business because they were so experienced, and all these other teams were like really kind of experiencing a tier one regular season event for the first time. That was my biggest takeaway.
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing is with Boston Bounce, I mean, they played last year in
Right.
West Seneca, at Niagara Frontier. And so they've played at least one before, but obviously the experience at LVC, those guys, it's a classic LVC roster right there. You'll see them at every East Coast tournament. And they play together for so long. I'm not surprised that even when Bounce was up 14-11, and they ended up blowing that match. I mean, I just wasn't surprised by that. I never felt like Bounce ever really was fully in control. I felt like LVC still, I would say I knew that it was going to happen, just not surprised that that match was going to go the way it did. And but then again, if Bounce could have turned and won one of those points, I mean, changes the entire outlook of the entire VLA at this point.
100%. It
And
absolutely does. And that's the margin that we're going to talk about later, and how close things are in the standings. I couldn't agree more. And they were extremely close. And I'm sure if you were to ask the Boston guys, they would probably admit that they blew that fifth set against LVC a little bit. And that would have changed the dynamic of the league. But as it is, LVC was just so much more clutch when games got super close. There were so many examples of that throughout the, like, look at that. Look at match number five, that second match against Boston. Same exact thing. Like every set was close, and in almost all the sets that were close, LVC was the clutch one that was able to just get it done because they've been there before.
yeah, and that's the thing is experience matters so much with these teams. And you'll even see that with some of the other results from the following events. It's you know these teams that have played together for a little while. I'm not saying that Bounce hasn't played together for a while. Force has definitely played together for a little bit, but playing actual VLA matches like this, it's something. Obviously, experience comes into play pretty handily, and you just see we see a lot of the same results in these regards because these teams have been there. They've done it. They've won their gone through it and earned their place. And nothing, not that Force hasn't earned their place or anything like that. They're definitely a tier one team, a quality team. They just yeah, they just inexperience in this type of
Right.
environment and this type of event. And I I feel that they will get there relatively quick. I don't think this is one of those things where they're going to be on the beating end of that stick the entire time. But I mean, they are East Division is definitely stronger than I anticipated it being this year.
Yeah, I think that's well said. Just to pull a couple things out from each team that impressed me from that event before we move on. LVC picking up Joby Ramos was a much bigger deal than I think any of us gave it credit for going into that event before we saw it. That dude was such a difference maker at the setter position. So, like you see that MVP in the second match, he was so gnarly from the service line, defensively, just winning those joust on the net plays. And he's not a big dude; he's like 6'1", maybe. But the offense that he ran and Bounce as well has some really good setters on their team. The offense that Joby ran that entire tournament, he was able to play all 4 matches, was just insane. The offense that they ran, even without all of the usual LVC weapons, and they're certainly going to get those guys back. But Joby was probably my MVP of the entire weekend if I had to pick one. He was the most impressive player to me, and to do that as a setter, I thought was just crazy impressive.
Yeah, 100%. And I've played against him before. And I think that he was a huge key pickup for Team LVC and really changes the entire outlook of what they can possibly do this year. Granted, he is playing the rest of the season with them. I know that some guys will come and go, but um, I felt like LVC has kind of missed, and nothing to take away from what they did last year. But I felt like the setter spot was the one area they've kind of lacked as far as top level setters in the league. And I think that Joby Ramos definitely brings that into brings them up another level. And when their passing struggled, he did a great job getting balls, to the hitters the way he needed to. And like you said, making those key plays at the net, little jousts here and there, being a solid, aggressive server, and not, having just an easy float or anything like that. I mean, it puts pressure on teams and just makes him a complete player. And that's something I think that LVC definitely needed to really be a complete team for the season.
Yeah, I agree. That was a huge step in the right direction for just the way that I see their team going as they continue to add pieces to have a guy like Joby, and then they're going to get Christian Smith back for Buffalo and probably for the rest of the season. So they'll have two great options at center there. But Joby, man, was such a rock star that event. And so for Boston, my biggest takeaway was that they have so many bodies on that roster. They have like 20 dudes at least, if not more. They brought so many players to that event in Connecticut. They moved a lot of pieces around. They were able to get a lot of guys looks and understand what worked together and what didn't. I give their coach Konstantinov. I really enjoyed talking to him, getting to know like how he was attacking that Boston program. I love what they're doing over there. They are very good at every position. I wouldn't say there's a position other than maybe the middle in which they're great. The biggest question mark for sure is opposite because they've got big shoes to fill in Jalen Penrose leaving to go play for Team Pineapple, at least when he comes back from Switzerland. So that was a question mark. And so we saw Greg Woods from Springfield. Then we saw even a little bit of Neil Ferraro, who's a middle, play on the right, like that first match against Force that Friday. He was balling. He said he really hardly ever played opposite in his career. I think that honestly might be the highest ceiling path for that position for Boston. But while they are really, really good at a lot of positions, I wouldn't say they're elite at any one of them. And my question for them is like, how are they going to continue to manage that wealth of quantity of good bodies and manufacture a great product of 7 players out of that? And they were very close to doing that. There were stretches of brilliant volleyball from them, but it was not the LVC didn't out talent Bounce. That wasn't the reason they beat him twice. It was just that they were more mentally mature and understood situations a little bit more. So Bounce will have a quick learning curve, especially with as many options as they have. But how that funnel is going to work on like a championship Sunday, if they're to get there, or in like elimination matches in a tournament like VLA Cup, for example, what they're going to do there is really interesting to me.
Yeah, and again, like you said, the middles are I would like to say the best in the East Division. As soon as Blake Leeson and Mike Marshman come
Marshman.
back, I think that just goes straight back to LVC. And nothing against AJ Witkowski
Lance.
and Lance Rogers. I mean, they're fantastic middles. They're great middles, honestly. And Bounce has great middles too. But when you get Blake Leeson and Marshman, I mean, you're really bringing that's I think the two top middle tandem in the VLA. So yeah, so I mean, it kind of evens out there. But yeah, again, we'll see what Bounce does. They have a lot of guys. LVC, you know what they're going to do because they've done it for years.
Yeah. Right.
And Bounce just needs to kind of find their way in that. They got to find, okay, these are the guys, and I think that they have a lot of guys. I mean, look at both of their setters were MVPs for them in this. Sorry, I guess I thought that one of them was Colin Ritter was MVP, and then I forgot his name.
Cameron Ponce is Cameron Ponce is
Ponce,
really good
yes.
too.
And and he's been match MVP before, had a great VLA Cup last year. It's actually surprising seeing the Bounce team because Bounce at VLA Cup last year was pretty much 7 guys that ran the show. Jordan Dupre wasn't there this past week or in the last event, and so yeah, they got a lot of guys that they got to figure out. Okay, who is our 7? And we don't know when we'll see that. We may see it at the East Division Cup. We may see it in May. We may not see it till VLA Cup.
True. So, however, like we're going to talk about when we get to the Central Division Cup in a minute, the winning a VLA Cup tournament, whether it's one of the divisional ones or the big one, there's a learning curve to that in how you manage your roster and how you move your pieces around and how you can't take any match for granted against a tier 1 or a tier 2 team, and you have to really focus on every set that you can win mattering a lot. The fact that Boston has so many dudes, all of whom can play, is going to help them a lot if they can travel with that roster to events like that. So like in a regular season event like this, I would think that it would be more you would ride your starting 7 pretty much as much as you can. But in a tournament where you're playing sometimes 3 matches in a day, and it might be for 3 days in the VLA Cup example, the depth that you have that can all act like legitimately contribute and not drop your level off that far is a big advantage. So I think that's the positive spin on the Bounce quantity over perhaps quality discussion, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely, and we'll see that more as the teams do have that, present that depth. But when we talk about taking a team to a cup, I mean, there's still only one team that's ever won a cup. So, but we'll talk about that later.
Yeah, and then last but not least, Northeast Forest. I mean, I know they went 0-4. They were competitive at times. They were missing a couple crucial pieces. Like no Nick Hunt was a big deal. They need that guy to be an out-of-system scorer and allow themselves to move Clay Paulin back into the middle where he can dominate. They were average at best at every position. There wasn't a single standout player, well, except for Tim McIntosh. Just like Garrett said when we had him on the show, he was like, dude, our libero, Tim McIntosh, is going to wow you and might be the best in the league. And I'm like, I don't think you know who else plays libero in this league, but he was not wrong, dude. Tim McIntosh was by far the best player on that Northeast Force squad in Connecticut. And they get a couple more pieces of firepower back, and they improved their serving, which was downright horrible at that event. Horrible, so bad. And I've talked to Garrett about this. He went into Stat Together and crunched a lot of the numbers for his team's serving performance. Their serving performance was just horrible. So they fixed that. They get a couple other pieces, and they don't give 8 points a set away for free on service errors. They're a contender immediately. So that's my takeaway for Northeast Force.
Yeah, no, and I actually wrote about that on the VLA reviews. I mean, you see that number, and I think that they had in 4 total matches, I want to say 60, 70 missed serves, and it's like there's no way you can win.
Oh, it's
it's impossible.
They weren't getting any return in aces either. A lot of them were just foolish.
I think it was like 60 to 12 or something like that, 60 to 10. And it was and so if you're going 1 for 1 or even 2 for 1, maybe you got a shot there, but that was a really tough stat to swallow right there. And it's like, well, man, maybe if they can flip this around a little bit,
it's an easy fix at that point. You see that number, right. It's so bad to just look at that number, and that's an easy item of focus for them. So I'm excited
Yeah.
to see what they do in Buffalo, because without Ruckus at that tournament, like we'll talk about in a minute, it's kind of a wide open deal, and Northeast Force has a big opportunity to prove that they shouldn't be somebody that's being slept on, and maybe right now that they are. So I'm excited to see that.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, let's move on to your home turf, Mr. Vince. So the following week after that Connecticut event, I turned around and promptly flew out to beautiful sunny Arizona, which was awesome in mid-February. I loved being there. We played those first two matches in State Farm Stadium, which has to be the coolest venue the VLA will ever play at, and then the new Legacy Center down in Mesa for the other four matches. So my big takeaway from this event is how good Sport Connects looked, and they beat your Ascension team, Vince, twice in four, and the three sets that they won in each of those matches were pretty convincing. And then the other two matches against the Rising Tide, like we'll talk about, didn't really prove anything to me, but just the fact that a lot of their main guns made that trip and played well and managed the three matches in that day on Saturday and came out of that undefeated with the full 12 points was really impressive to me. And I know in my previous power rankings I said that I think Sport Connect is going to win the West Division, and sure enough, they're looking good in that spot right now.
Yeah, I'll tell you, I mean, they're outside hitters. Madison, Hayden, Nick Arfino. I mean, they control the ball really well. I didn't feel like, from my standpoint, playing with this, playing with Ascension, obviously, we couldn't get them out of system, and even if we did, they always have Hackworth in the
Hackworth.
back put the ball back to, and I mean the guys next to unstoppable. So I mean, they have so many weapons. You know, you just they played a solid weekend. The first time that any of us have pulled out 12 points in a weekend.
It's
And
true.
you got to give them credit. I mean, when they're clicking, they're in system. They served really well, great defense, blocked real. I mean, they're huge. They're a huge blocking team. You got Ian Wright up there, Conrad Kaminsky. I mean, it's a tough block to get by, let's just say. And they serve really well. They're a tough serving team. They got some really good jump serves. They mix the variety of floats, and you just can't say that enough about them really, because right now sitting at number one in the West. They were off until VLA Cup, and they have some time to prepare. They went out and beat
Stanford the other
Stanford.
night. Yeah.
I mean, they're definitely a team that should be of concern from a lot of teams out there. And in the the West Division Cup, Hackworth was injured. Ryan Bridge didn't make the trip because of COVID, and so that's two huge pieces that are. Have they been healthy? Maybe that tournament goes a different way. Maybe Rising Tide doesn't, make the finals, or maybe even Ruckus doesn't even win it. I mean, it's tough to say, obviously, but I mean, when you have two key pieces like that, they are a very, very dangerous team. And obviously, the Madison Hayden and Kirill Rodenko didn't make the trip, but you have him in the mix as well. That's a pretty dangerous team.
Yeah, Sport Connect really has no weaknesses. That's my impression of them right now. They are just so good at every position and then in every phase of the game, exactly like you just talked about. And yeah, they flexed a lot of size and just a lot of ball control and super high level experience there in Arizona, and they came out looking pretty perfect. So your Ascension team, Vince, honestly, pretty good performance. I mean, I'm sure it would have been nice for you guys to grab a point here and there from those Sport Connects games where you took one set but weren't able to take a second one, and then you took care of a Rising Tide team that just didn't put together a roster that was going to be competitive that weekend. So took care of business there, and like you were missing a couple pieces too. Like you didn't have Sam, you didn't have Zach, but a few guys stepped up and impressed me. I think Jonathan Bishop is one of the best young middle blockers in the league that's being slept on quite a bit. I thought Turner Douglas played well before like banging his chin on the floor and having to go get stitches. I thought Cody Montano at libero played well. So I thought there were a lot of positives to take out of your guys. So give me your take on that from inside the huddle.
Yeah, it's been a great opportunity. I mean, you never want to have a guy, Sam, who's been pretty much our outside hitter or OH1 for the season, and obviously not having Zach Melcher, who is our starting setter. for an event. I mean, you hate to not have those guys because you want to build around them. But at the same time, with them not being there, there's opportunities for other guys to step up and perform. And I felt like you said, the guys, Cody Montano has actually had an amazing season. Left us no doubt who our starting libero is for after losing Jesus Izaguirre. And so we've had huge success at our libero position. We're very happy with. Obviously, Brian Lewis, huge factor in being able to carry us through a lot of adversity through these times, with rebuilding our roster. And obviously, Jonathan Bishop being able to find his flow a little bit more, and it comes with the practice and the unity that we've kind of started to develop, playing, practicing consistently, playing consistently. And that's something that I'm very satisfied with our growth at this point, considering that we lost 8 players from last year. And the fact that we are where we are shows a lot to where our guys are really working hard to, bring up their game and improve so that they belong in this league.
Oh yeah, without question. I couldn't agree more. I think you guys showed up so far this year in both the West Cup and then there in Arizona extremely well, considering the rebuild phase that you've talked about well on this show and have clearly acknowledged is going on with your guys right now. And maybe the upward trajectory back to championship contention is going a little faster than we expected. So yeah, I like what I've seen from you boys. Good shit. Good work.
Thanks. Yeah,
Uh,
we're working.
And then last but not least, I mean, we've got to talk about the Rising Tide, at least this version of the Rising Tide, because that was not the real Rising Tide. I know this very well because I stepped in off the commentator bench and played for 2 matches. I was not expecting this. I had a blast, by the way. I set for a whole game. I set that last entire match, match 6 there for Rising Tide against Sport Connects, and we didn't get swept. I was thrilled about that. But the real Rising Tide, like the actual like championship caliber Rising Tide that wasn't able to put together a team to make that trip to Arizona, is alarming to me because they can't expect to only feel the great team when it's convenient for them, like when it's in Orange County. Part of being in this league and like being a championship caliber team is to be able to travel and bring your real roster to all the real events, no matter where they are. And the fact that they weren't able to do that was pretty concerning to me. And after the good stuff that we saw from Rising Tide in Southern California there, where they had a lot of their usual cannons and were outstanding largely, to not even be able to bring any of those guys to Arizona, and that's not that difficult of a trip, is concerning for sure. And I hope that they can figure their system out and their organization out for VLA Cup, because they've got a chance to really do some damage there if they put the right guys together. But I mean, getting to the middle of nowhere, Indiana, is a lot more difficult than getting to Arizona from SoCal. So I don't really know. I certainly wasn't happy about this. I did get to play. That was cool. But I would like to see the real Rising Tide put together a team that can legitimately go out and event to event show the consistency that some of these other teams are, like Sport Connects, for example.
Yeah, and that's a great take on things because Sport Connects is showing where it's going to pay off, right?
Right, right.
For one, I mean, we look at seeding for the VLA Cup and Sport Connects. We'll have the 1 seed in or 1 seed of the West Division teams, wherever that falls. In that, so right now, Rising Tide is looking at basically last place in the West. And so it's going to affect seeding pretty substantially going into that tournament. But then on top of that, Sport Connects playing together and traveling, playing. I mean, there's a camaraderie that's built. There is a type of level that your team progresses with, and Sport Connects is doing it. Rising Tide isn't. So where does this fall for Rising Tide? What's going to happen is yeah, Rising Tide can grab a lot of talent out of Southern California. However, does that talent take them to be strong enough to beat Sport Connects after they played a tenured season? I mean, clearly it hasn't when they've been grabbing guys, and then you got Ruckus who's beating them in the West Division Cup, and Ruckus is a little bit more of a solid foundation of players, right? So they can't just expect to throw guys together and go in and be the top team there. They're going to continue to lose cup championships or not even get there eventually with this process. So if they want to maintain their competitiveness and they want to stay up there, and I'm not saying that Ascension is at that level to where we will beat a rising tide that throws a Southern California group together.
They have
What
such
I'm
a
saying is
massive
that
talent pool. It's crazy. It's crazy.
it really is, and they have that luxury, and luckily for them, they have the capability generally to be able to put it together for big events. But what's going to happen is they're going to slip up, and other teams are going to step up and take that place. And now, yeah, they'll struggle to put things together, but it's not going to be that same level that it would have been. I mean, for example, last year, I truly believe that had Joe K and Serge Nadazhdin been healthy for our match against Rising Tide to go to the finals, I think that we would have won that hands down. We had been playing together for years. Rising Tide was a team thrown together. So, I just really think that they really need to kind of figure that out a little bit better and put together the product that we know that they can. That's
Oh
the thing
yeah.
is they
Oh yeah. They
can
totally
beat the
can.
best team in the league, in my opinion. But whether or not they will, put that together to do it and have the commitment to themselves in the league, then that's to be seen, obviously.
Right. Yeah, their organization's got work to do, but like kind of one of the themes of the season so far to me is that having success in this league is a learning curve. That you there is a process, not just like the how you manage your roster, but really how you handle everything about your organization that affects where we're at in the standings right now. I mean, Rising Tide paid for their failure to field the roster by walking out of Arizona with literally 0 points. And that's after having a huge advantage in the standings after West Division Cup. So they have no one to blame but themselves for that, for where they're at in the standings. So it's kind of the cool thing about the VLA format in both like tier one, tier two, the different style of tournaments that we have is that if you don't put your best foot forward in any given event, you will suffer for that either in the standings or in seeds or in just losing with an inferior roster. That's just the consequence of not putting out your best possible team event in and event out. And that's exactly what we want to encourage is being able to bring your best roster event after event after event. So I think it's honestly it's kind of good for the league to prove that you can't totally like forget about an event. Don't put any stock into it because you're going to walk out of there. Sport Connects is going to jump 12 points over you in the standings, and there's really no coming back from that. So you reap what you sow, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, I think we went over that pretty well. And now the West Division, so you guys have got plenty of time to orchestrate your organizations before a VLA Cup in May. That's a pretty long layoff between mid-February and mid-May. So I have high expectations for all you guys in Indiana.
Yeah.
All
Yep,
right, so
yep. And it's going to be interesting. I mean, it's going to be an interesting watching a lot of these. I mean, there's three more events that's going to happen in between here and the VLA Cup, and for us to pretty much watch all of this kind of unfold before us.
yeah, that's true.
Um, and I think the West Division, I think Sport Connects is in a very, very good position to secure that. They could secure it as early as the VLA Cup if they play the right way. But it's going to be interesting for us to see these other teams and the other events play out because we may be fighting in that last tournament to see. I still think that three of us can go. I still think three of us can make the playoffs.
I
So
agree.
yeah,
It's very, very possible. And yeah, it's going to come down to it because yeah, you guys are the only division that has still regular season play after the VLA Cup. That's Memorial Day in Southern California. So that really adds an interesting dynamic for sure.
yep.
All right, let's move on to probably the biggest, craziest, wildest tournament, maybe in VLA history. The Central Division Cup in Chicago, my backyard. I loved not having to travel for an event for once. That was great. This tournament was nuts. 13 teams is the biggest that the league has ever had. All tier two teams in the semifinals and beyond was unprecedented. Both tier one teams, Iceman and Pineapple, getting upset in the quarterfinals was absolutely wild. We saw a bunch of debuts like Team ECV, Madison Inferno, Milwaukee Dive, River City Flow, although they're a rebrand. Like and then that gym too, man. That College of DuPage was just incredible. I think we really set a new standard. Like me, Tim Faulkner, and the guys who helped put that event together set a new standard for what a great like in-person VLA event is supposed to be like, because that was really sweet. And the finals of that delivered. Ruckus goes down 2-0 to Swede, and they reverse sweep them. I think it was 20-18 in the fifth at the end. And Swede had 2 or 3 at least match points to win the championship and couldn't get it done. This was nuts. It was absolutely crazy. There's a lot to get to about this. Where do you want to start, Vince? What's your first takeaway from that tournament watching from afar?
You know, I was traveling in Northern California with my college team at Park University Gilbert, so I was pretty much driving around there watching. I know that's probably illegal now, and my athletic directors want to hear that, but yeah, I had it right there in front of right the window while I was watching all these matches, and I mean, just a fantastic tournament. I mean, you had 4 courts going at once, and
Streamed every
I
game.
just I absolutely loved being able to just pull up all these different matches, just from the YouTube channel as a member, obviously, and being able to just see some of the different matchups, and it's almost like, I mean, obviously to a smaller scale, like watching the NCAA March Madness. It's you're seeing
Similar.
some matchups that you just wouldn't expect, and then every team comes out and brings it. And you look at 13th right here, ECV. They got 3 points, take 3 teams to
Because
5.
yeah, because they lost
You
three
know,
five
it's just
setters. It was crazy.
yeah, and what I mean, it's just like it's incredible to see the teams, and I give the tier 2 teams so much credit for showing up,
Oh
putting
yeah,
together great teams, great players throughout the entire thing, and I mean, just fantastic volleyball. And it's no team laid down, no, I just was so excited to see such quality volleyball, from top to bottom being played, and it's so exciting to see this happen with the VLA. And I think everybody was just tuned in, and absolute amazing growth throughout the league from that weekend, and definitely our best event so far.
for sure. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Mikey in the chat saying best tournament of the season. I agree. There are lots of storylines that come out of this, at least from like what happened on the court and what the final placings are. Obviously, we've got ourselves a dynasty on our hands. Ruckus now 3 for 3 in VLA Cup tournaments. They are the only team to have ever won one of these tournaments in the history of the league. And of all the times for some team to come out and knock them off the top, this was the opportunity. Not only did they go down 0-2 to Swede and were on their very, very, very last breath of life in that championship match, but like they lost 6. They won against Milwaukee Dive and Pool 16-14 in the fifth. Like they avoided both the tier 1 teams. Like there was a real opportunity for several teams to get a legitimate punch in at Ruckus and perhaps be the first team to beat them. But when it comes down to, for me, is that winning a VLA Cup tournament, given the formats and given how difficult it is and how many matches you have to play in such a short amount of time, that's a learning curve. Ruckus is the team who has figured that out the best. Not only do they have an unbelievable roster, they have Joe Kawiakamoa, who's just the man. They have Garrett Como, probably the best libero in the league. Actually, I would say by far the best libero in the league, and that's saying a lot. Great outsides. Mark Olson in the middle literally owns every one-on-one individual matchup against every other middle he plays. It's incredible to watch him. Not only is Ruckus amazing, but they as a team, and Coach Steph Brule gets a ton of credit, have figured out how to win these tournaments. They will, a lot of times, they'll play their bench for 2 sets. They'll realize that that's not working for them. They'll put the starters back in and they'll rescue it. They'll bring it back and they'll win. And they take no game for granted. They never overlook a tier 2 team or based on seed or anything like that. They play every match like it's the most important match of the tournament, and they figured out a way to manage their roster and keep themselves just fresh enough to be able to win these championship matches. Every other team hasn't figured that out. I think that every other team in this tournament just ran into situations where they either made some bad choices with how they managed their lineups, or just weren't experienced enough, or weren't deep enough, or didn't really understand what they were getting into. And Ruckus was the only one that did, and therefore they won the tournament.
Yeah, no, and that's just it. I think that we definitely looked at Iceman because of Iceman's roster. They are at home, their depth and whatnot, and I think that everyone kind of looked at this like this is going to be an Iceman Ruckus finals, and I think we put that out there from before it even happened, right? And the story for me, I mean, River City Flow jumps out there and knocks them off in the first match, right?
Reverse swept them
And
in the
yeah,
first pool
and
match on Saturday.
yeah, and it's just like, okay, well, I mean, there it is. I mean, River City Flow is known to, obviously you can't sleep on those guys. I mean, they have pretty much uh, done this to any tier one team. I mean, they beat us the same way back at VLA Cup. Came out just as I think the 11 seed and just put it to us, and that's exactly what they did. They come in as like I think a 9 seed maybe, and
9,
they
yeah.
go in, they handle business, and they are just a solid team. Nick Drucker and Sam Albus, and I mean Nestor Payne. They have such a quality line. But then we talk about exactly what you're saying. Ruckus, how they manage their roster, that learning curve. Flow, Dive, ran out of steam.
Oh yeah.
Swede, the reason that they were there, they have the depth,
Right.
right? They're a
Right.
team that I give Swede so much credit because Swede is they are in it to get promotion this season. They are doing it
100%.
to get it now. And where I
They
feel
were
like
so close. So close to winning this tournament.
very,
Very
very,
close.
very close. And if you look at it points wise too, all they need a consistent. They don't even need an outstanding finish for the last three. They need a consistent finish, and then they're going to get there. And they're on the right path. Yeah, they wanted that win against Ruckus. That's not a deal breaker for them at all. They're
No.
right there to handle what they need to do. Getting the Iceman victory.
Finally.
They're literally the only team that has beat Iceman and Team Pineapple. I mean, no other team other than Ruckus and Team LVC has beat Iceman and Team Pineapple. I mean, so Sweet is right there showing, hey, we belong in this Central Division. And nothing to say. Obviously, Dive is coming in a little bit late in the game.
They're
And
really
they came
good
in a little
too.
bit
They're really
very,
good.
very, very good. They came in just a little unmanned, undermanned. Didn't quite have the depth to really get them past that past Ruckus the second time around. And nothing against 630 Slunkers, who I think has a solid, consistent team. However, you kind of see where the Chicago teams fell, or the Central Division teams, I should say, fell right here with seeing Swede, Milwaukee Dive, then the Slunkers, and then Madison Inferno, who got their first win, which was great. And I kind of see this as where a good telling of where these teams stand at the moment, and they got to recognize what we need to do to supersede some of these other teams that are in front of us.
Yeah, and I've gotten the question a lot since the results of this tournament came out. Like, isn't the league upset about the two tier one teams' performance? And I said, absolutely not. Quite the opposite. I am so stoked at the performance of these tier two teams. 4 of them, all 4 in the semifinals. It proves that not a single team from seed 1 through 13, you cannot overlook anyone in any of these VLA Cup tournaments, independent of seed, independent of what tier they play in. It doesn't matter. And it's not like being tier one isn't just it's not necessarily the 8 best teams. I mean, obviously look at Ruckus. They're untouched. They're 3 for 3 in cup tournaments. They play in tier 2. Swede, tier 2, Dive, Flow, tier 2 for now. Who knows? But like that's not what tier 1 versus tier 2 is about. It's not about the 8 tier 1 teams are supposed to be the 8 best teams in the league. That is not what it's about. And both of our tier 1 representatives, Iceman and Pineapple, Iceman in particular, have got a problem with overlooking tier 2 teams. That Iceman versus Swede quarterfinal was kind of embarrassing for the Icemen. That is an individual matchup that they have owned. They have owned the city of Chicago. They have destroyed and demoralized Swede in the past. But the lineup that they played in that match was one that the only thing that they could have been going on in their heads was, we've got this no matter who we put out on the floor. It doesn't matter who we put out there. We can sleepwalk past this Swede team. We're tier one. They're not. We're going to be fine. We can focus on the semifinals. We can focus on beating Ruckus in the finals. Wrong. You cannot do that in this league. You cannot do that in these tournaments. And that Iceman lineup they put out did not play well at all. They got swept by Swede. I think they were down 20. I think Iceman was up 24-21 in the first, and Swede went on a 5-0 run to win 26-24. Swede was better than them that day, and they deserved that win. And there's just something about Icemen against tier two teams. They take their foot off the gas, and they just don't quite execute at the level that we know their roster can. Because I still believe that their roster is the best in tier one. They're still my pick to win tier one championships. But as far as a tournament like VLA Cup goes, I've now got a lot of questions about this Iceman team because they haven't shown that they can mentally keep it together for every single match of a cup tournament like that.
Yeah, and I agree with that. They have a better record against tier one teams than they do against tier two teams. And
Yes.
it's
crazy.
Substantial. I mean, the Iceman actually hasn't lost to a tier one team since they played Team LVC in the Kickoff Classic in 2020. That's how long it's been since they've lost to a tier one team. They've only lost to Bounce. They've lost to Ruckus. Now Swede. They lost to River City Flow.
Yeah.
And, and it's just, there it is right there. I mean, they need to recognize the urgency of playing against, because there is the tier two teams have it. The tier two teams that are playing are tier one teams. They see that extra point. They see, hey, tier one, let's go beat that team. They're not going to lay down. They're going to give you their best game because that's their measuring stick for, to say, hey, this is where we belong as a team. And if they beat you, I mean, for one, they're getting extra points. And then for two, they're saying, hey, we just beat that tier one team, and we belong there, and they're proving they're, and so, I mean, Iceman has struggled with it. I'm not going to lie. Ascension has struggled with it, where we've lost to a lot of tier two teams. And I mean, we did the same thing in the quarterfinals against Slunkers. We were in control. We crushed them the first match or first set. And then all of a sudden it's like they turned it on, and we ran out of steam late, and they finished us off. And it's like the tier one teams can't just assume that they're better than any tier two teams. They got to go out there, got to do the work and beat them.
And as for Team Pineapple, I mean, I know they finished in 5th as well. They couldn't get past Milwaukee Dive. They got swept in the quarterfinals as well. I actually I would spin that weekend kind of as a positive for Team Pineapple. I think there was a lot of good that came out of that weekend for them. They put a lot more pieces together than what we saw in Indiana in January, where I was not impressed by them. They finally get Tomas Goldsmith back, who I actually didn't think played all that well, but we know how well he can play. They got Bruno, who was unbelievable, just like fresh off the boat back from India, having played like legitimate pro volleyball for a month. He looked incredible at the opposite. They got Matt Walsh back. They got Kevin Owens back. They got Brendan Serrain as an option on the right side who looked really good. The only thing they were missing was a libero. Sean Dryden was not there, and that changed everything for Team Pineapple. They put Gebert at libero. They put Tomas at libero. Like, they were soul searching for any answers at that libero position, and it was not working for them. So if they have Dryden there, especially with Iceman losing early, there's a chance they go out and win that tournament. I think that's as big of a difference as a libero like Sean Dryden makes versus literally not having a true libero at all. So other than that, for Pineapple, I actually was kind of impressed by them that weekend.
Yeah, they're really trying to, they're not happy with how they performed in that first tournament.
Right.
And event
they
one,
they didn't play well.
Yeah, they played poorly. They were understaffed, and they turned it around, and they played fantastic to a point. I mean, they again, if they have a Sean Dryden out there, they potentially could have challenged a Ruckus in the finals. Obviously it's kind of to be seen, but I think moving forward, they're putting the pieces right back, and then they're going to get another option with Jalen Penrose down the road soon, and that really completes the team. And it does make them it definitely boosts up their ceiling to where they can actually, I don't know if they can win the Central, but they can definitely earn a playoff spot.
Yeah, that's my takeaway too. They're not going to win the Central. They dug themselves a little too big of a hole in that first event, and then I think that Louisville, which we'll talk about in a little bit, with Pineapple Iceman and Milwaukee Dive, I think that's going to be a bloodbath. I think a lot of teams are going to those three teams are just going to destroy each other that weekend, and Pineapple kind of needs a miracle to win the division at this point, but they very well could make the playoffs. That wouldn't surprise me, and but they've got a task ahead of them in Louisville. They've really got to put together a complete roster for that event. Otherwise, they're really running out of time.
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, other than that, for this event, I just thought it was incredible. The tier two performances were so positive and so promising. These teams are taking the league so seriously. They're gunning for the top of these tournaments. They're gunning for the tier one teams. They're gunning for promotion. And the level of volleyball that was played, I thought, was pretty high. I wouldn't say it was like VLA Cup last year high. I think that was still the best level of volleyball the league has ever produced. But the battles here and like sort of the March Madness style feel of it, and the kind of the spontaneity and the chaos and the anything can happen at any point in the tournament, was the most entertaining tournament for me that we've ever had.
Yeah, yeah, this was one of those that definitely just all the upsets through and through. I mean, not a lot. I mean, obviously Ruckus being on top, that's not necessarily a surprise. I mean, they're the only team who's done it.
But
But
it's how they got
I
there that
mean,
was a
you
lot more interesting than usual.
and yeah, absolutely. I mean, going the path that they did wasn't as easy as it was for them in the West Division Cup by any means. And then as you see, you just look at that finals result, and it's just, I mean, there's a lot of parity out there. You know, there's a lot of teams that are moving up and down, and then you see right there at the bottom, ECB, brand new team, Inferno, brand new team, and then you look at, okay, tall ones, hey, figured it out, got a couple wins. You know, New York Pride consistently finishing fifth and seventh, gaining, traction, earning points,
Points on
So it's
points. Oh
like,
yeah.
yeah. And so it's like you see teams that are kind of finding their place in that consistency. And it's really, really cool to see and really impressive to see that these teams are basically becoming consistent competitors. And they also just got to make a couple different moves here and there, add a new player, maybe two, and all of a sudden you see maybe New York Pride jump from a seventh to a fifth or a third, and so it's really fun to watch, really fun to see, and we're just going to see more and more development as we go, and it's just setting up for the fantastic second half of the season.
Yep, very well said. So after all this that we just talked about, let's take a look at the standings. So since the last time we did this show, there was movement in the standings of every division. We finally got some East Coast action with LVC 4-0, almost perfect 11 points. Central Division now 2 events in with back in Indiana in January, and that's Central Cup included. Those 2 Icemen losses kind of surprising, but 21 points looks awfully good league wide right now. And then the West, Rising Tide going from looking incredibly good to at 4-1, then losing 4 in a row. They're 4-5, and they're last in probably the most top to bottom competitive division in the league. So that's the standings for Tier 1 right now. And then Tier 2, it's even crazier. And we will dig into Tier 2 a little bit more in more detail either next week or the week after, before the East Division Cup and before Louisville. But Tier 2 is crazy, and the races for promotion in the Central in particular, like Milwaukee Dive in one event picked up 11 points. That's insane. Swede through like 3 events, including VLA Cup last year, has only 18 points. So that's literally anybody's game there. 630 Slunkers through 2 events, 12 points. Like that, the Central Division in Tier 2 is nuts. And even if you don't look at Ruckus just dominating everyone in the West Division of Tier 2, there's some fun stuff going on there as well. So we'll dig more into that on next week's show, but we want to just put it out there with the current standings and how insane it all is.
Yeah, no, yeah. Again, we'll be covering Tier 2 next week, or in the next show.
Mm-hmm.
But like you're saying, it's a battle all the way through, and that's exactly what we want. We want teams being competitive and working hard to get that advantage and get that promotion. And it's been fantastic for the league and the growth of the league and the growth of the sport.
All right. So before we take a really quick look at that packed weekend, the one that Mikey's talking about in the chat there, where we will be in Louisville and Buffalo at the same time. Before we preview that just a little bit, I wanted to unveil my personal newest power rankings of Tier One after all the events that have happened so far. So these are the standings. It's not the power rankings. These are the standings as they are right now. If you just sort all of Tier 1 from 1 to 8, and obviously the East have played significantly less matches. They've all only played 4, whereas the others have played 2 events now. But you've got Iceman, Sport Connects there at the top, and then a super tight group of Ascension, Pineapple, Rising Tide, and I'm sure LVC after the East Division Cup will be amongst the leaders in the league as well. But with that in mind, here are my most up-to-date power rankings of VLA Tier 1. So take a look at that. You've got the teams, you've got their current record, and you've got their change from where I had them in the last power rankings. So the last power rankings I did, by the way, were after the Connecticut event. They were after Connecticut, but before Arizona. And since then, the East hasn't played. So that's why the Northeast Force haven't gotten anywhere, because they're still the only winless team in the league, and they haven't played since the last power rankings I did. So they're still 0-4. It would be crazy for me not to put them in 8th right now. However, there was some movement of the East teams because LVC is now the only undefeated team in the league. I couldn't justify not putting them first. After what I saw from them in Connecticut and being able to win every match in every different way in that tournament, like we talked about, and without even all of their normal weapons, the way they were able to do that, and not having lost a match yet, I couldn't help but put them at number 1. Sport Connects jumps up from 4 to 2 after their 12-point perfect performance in Arizona. Icemen dropped from 1 to 3 after their just inability to beat Tier 2 teams at the Central Cup at home, which I really thought they should have won that tournament. Rising Tide probably should have dropped further, but the only reason they dropped down from 2 to 4 and not further was because I know what they can still do when they actually have their real roster, but that performance in Arizona was pretty pitiful. And then I swapped Pineapple and Bounce at 5 and 6 because I was encouraged by what Team Pineapple did at Central Cup, and I understand I have a better picture now of what I think their ceiling can be, and I think that Pineapple's ceiling is higher than both Boston and Vince's Ascension team. So that is my new Tier 1 power rankings: LVC, Sport Connects, Iceman, Rising Tide, Pineapple, Bounce, Ascension, Force, in that order. Vince, your thoughts?
Yeah, if teams don't like it, they got to change it, right?
That's
Go out
right.
there and get some wins. It's as simple as that, and obviously, I will look at the East right now. We're going to be discussing that momentarily, but the big thing with them is that you see how Milwaukee Dive grabbed 11 and still got third, 11 points and still got third. That's what a cup can do, is you can go out there and get 4, three, you can go 3-1. You can do that in a cup. And what's going to happen is you bump up those ratings, right? And I think Ascension, and nothing to take away from what my guys have accomplished this year, but I think that us jumping up and grabbing a couple wins against Tier 2 teams earlier gave us a lot of confidence moving forward, but more importantly, gave us a lot of points. And so Northeast Force is going to have that opportunity as well when they finally play against some of the Tier 2 teams, to kind of gauge where they're kind of at. And if they go 3-1, maybe they go 2-2, maybe they go 4-1, who knows. But the thing is that they're going to get some points. They're not going to finish 0-8 or
No.
be 0-8 at the end of this tournament. So that's a good opportunity for Force to play in this kind of the cup situation, to get some points. Bounces in the same situation. They are another team that can do really well in their Eastern East Division Cup. And so, do I think LVC is going to probably be number 1 at the end of this whole thing? Yeah, I don't see any team. I don't see them going 0-4. I don't see them losing to a lot of the teams that are in this, especially because they are going to have Leeson and they're going to have Marchman back. I think that they're going to be still at the top at the end of it. And I don't see any problem with this power ranking, honestly.
Well, thank you for validating my opinions, even though I put your team at seventh. That's an honorable take from you, Vince.
All right, guys, got to
All
win
right,
more, right?
so they got to win more. So
We
before
should
we
have beat
wrap up
Sport
the
Connects.
you could have beaten Sport Connects. You were close. You dropped a set to my embarrassment of a Rising Tide team. You shouldn't have done that.
So it's Sport Connects.
Yeah, so did Sport Connects. Great point. All right, so last but not least on the show today, we want to give at least a little bit of a preview of a packed, crazy, ridiculous weekend on April 9th and 10th, coming up in, I guess, 3 weekends from now. The only time in the season when the VLA will be in 2 places at once. The first one is the second regular season event of the Central Division. That will be at the JVA World Challenge in Louisville, Kentucky. That event is insane. It is enormous. It is so big. It's probably the biggest single convention center event that will be at this year, other than AAU Nationals. So it's gigantic. And Milwaukee Dive will be joining the 2 Tier 1 Central Division teams for a double round robin in Louisville, just like Swede did back in January in Indiana. So that will be a very interesting exhibition of where is Milwaukee Dive, not only compared to Iceman and Pineapple, but where are they compared to Swede? Because I think it's a 2-horse race for Tier 2 promotion in the Central Division. So we'll talk about that and break down the schedule and the rosters on next week's show. But that is one of 2 events going on the same weekend, April 9th and 10th. The other one, like Vince has alluded to several times, is the East Division Cup. Now, I want to, before we break this down in great detail on next week's show, I want to at least read down the seeds of this tournament to give people an idea of who's going to be there. And more importantly, who's not going to be there, because Ruckus and Emiola both will not be there. This will guaranteed be the first VLA Cup Series tournament that Ruckus will not win. It is therefore a wide open door opportunity for any of these 10 teams, 10-team tournament to come to Buffalo to the Niagara Frontier Center and win the VLA Cup tournament. So seeds in order: number 1, Team LVC; number 2, Boston Bounce; number 3, Northeast Force. You got the 3 Tier 1 East Division teams there. Chicago Swede is making the trip out east. They're 4th. New York Pride 5th. River City Flow 6th. And Flow and LVC being in the same pool is going to be very interesting. West Coast Brigade, coming all the way from Costa Mesa, will be there. They're seeded 7th, so they'll get a rematch with Flow in pools. ECV out of Cleveland is 8th, so they're in a pool with Bounce and Pride. And then last but not least, 2 teams making their debuts. Toronto Indocan, who I'm so excited about. Finally, we get a team from north of the border down playing for us. And Niagara Frontier. They're fielding their own team based out of upstate New York there in Buffalo. So that's it. 10 teams, 3 pools. Kind of a similar format to the tournament that we ran in SoCal, where the Vince was at, the West Division Cup. But we'll have 3 courts in Buffalo rather than 2. So we'll break that down in more detail on next week's show, and we'll have schedule and more pool detail and all that stuff. But Vince, right now, who's your pick to win that tournament?
Team LVC. I can't, I mean, I picked them to go 4-0, and their first event, I'm going to stick with it. I think that Team LVC, with the roster that they're going to be fielding at this event, I think that they are the team. They're definitely the team to beat the East, but for whatever reason, they control they control their home court pretty well, and I think that they're going to be pretty dangerous up there.
Yeah, the only team that LVC can never beat is Iceman, and Iceman won't be there. So they don't have that problem. They don't have that little problem to worry about. So it's hard to disagree with that, because I think that LVC is going to add a couple of those pieces of firepower, like we've talked about, even as early as the second weekend of April. But I think Bounce could make some noise depending on how they've taken what happened in Connecticut and learned it, and how they're going to engineer their performance and their strategy around a cup tournament. And I think Swede can make some noise as well. Swede is bringing pretty much their full starting roster and a good 11 or 12 guys at least to this tournament. I think they could be really good. And then you can't sleep on River City Flow either. My only question with them is, do they have enough bodies? Like in Chicago, they only had 8 guys. And you just can't survive that many matches in a VLA Cup Series tournament and win with only 8 guys. So if they bolster their depth a little bit, they could very well be a factor as well. But I think LVC, Bounce, and Swede are my top contenders right now going into it.
Yeah, and that's the thing though, is like I said in the power rankings discussion, I think that Northeast Force Balance and LVC are going to gain considerable ground with their matchups. I think that they're going to win a lot of matches, and they're going to bump up in the standings overall once this event happens. I think that Pride has played consistent. I think that they're going to do all right, probably finish in that fifth, seventh range. I think they'll grab a win or two. Depending on the roster that Brigade brings, they can be pretty dangerous too.
For sure.
Um,
Yeah.
and so, I mean, if the same group was with them in Chicago, I think that was in Seal Beach. I mean, I think that they're a little bit more dangerous team, but it's to be seen. I mean, that's the whole point of these different events is how well do you travel, and that's
Yep.
what we're trying to see right now. So I think as far as the tier two teams, a few of them are going to gain some points. The only ones I think that really grab substantial points would be Swede and potentially River City Flow. But I think that everyone else stays pretty consistent to what they're doing, and I think the tier one teams are going to gobble up a bunch of points.
Yeah, I agree with that. So, on the next episode of Around the VLA, whenever that happens to be, either next week or the following week, we'll go over more of those two events, how the VLA is going to kind of tackle having two events going on at the same time. I personally will be in Buffalo. Vince personally will be at neither of them. But in short, that Central Division weekend in Louisville, we're going to focus more on the in-house experience for all the thousands and thousands and thousands of spectators that are going to be there. And in Buffalo, while there will certainly be fans welcome in Buffalo, we're going to focus more on the digital online production. So those matches will be streamed. The Louisville matches will be recorded, and we'll do these little watch parties after the fact with me and some of the guys that played. So that's the kind of the overview of how that's going to go. But we'll talk about that more on the next episode around the VLA.
Yeah, so now you know.
now you get at least a little taste of it.
Yep.
So that's about it, ladies and gentlemen. Here's my power rankings one more time. We'll get these up on Instagram for the teams to start throwing their trash talk around in the next day or two. But thanks for watching. It's been great to catch up on all the. It was a crazy couple weeks there for a while where we had a lot going on, but it's been cool to digest it all and understand the landscape of the league about midway through the season. And we'll be back very shortly previewing kind of the month of April. And then we'll be back after that looking at the big one, which is VLA Cup in May. So, Vince, thanks for joining me, my man. It's good to see you. We'll talk soon.
Yep, absolutely. See you guys next time.
All right. Thanks for watching, boys and girls. We'll see you on the next episode of Around the VLA. Peace.